Hello, this is Brendan from Watto Training, and in this tutorial we take a look at assignment 4900. This assignment is a learning program that is written by Queensland car instructors. Let's take a closer look. The assessment task. Your task is to write a learning program for a learner driver. You have a student, Sarah Smith, pictured right, who is under 25 years of age and has just got her learner license. Sarah is given a Queensland Learner Logbook and information about how to download the free Queensland Learner Logbook app so she can start recording her driving experience. Sarah is going to do a minimum of 65 hours of supervised driving within her family and 15 hours of professional driver training with you. Sarah lives in your local area. Sarah will do her first 5 beginner lessons with you, 5 lessons approximately halfway through her learner logbook hours, then 5 lessons at the end as she prepares for her driving test. For Sarah to complete the logbook correctly, she must record 100 hours of supervised driving experience. Sarah's 100 hours must include 10 hours of night driving between sunset and sunrise. All entries must be recorded in minutes instead of hours and minutes to make it easier to calculate totals. For the hard copy book, all entries must be recorded in the correct column. The logbook entry pages have 3 columns for you to record the different types of driving experience. Experience with an accredited driver trainer counted as triple time for the first 10 hours. Total 600 real minutes equals 1,800 logbook minutes. Daytime experience between sunrise and sunset on a day. Night experience between sunset and sunrise on the next day. It is important that the student has a comprehensive training program during the logbook phase. Your task is to write a training program using the following template, A4900. The reason we give you a template is it gives you a foundation to work off to start setting up a learning program. You can change the design as you enter the industry about how you want to do things, but this gets you thinking, how can I put something together for a student like this so that we can have a plan of attack? Okay, in this slide we've got general information for C-Class, and here we've got just the general driving school details. These can be your actual situation, or they might be something that you're planning in the future, so they could be aspirational. So first of all, put the name of the driving school, prepared by, that's your name as in the student, your contact details, phone number, email, workplace address, your catchment area, that's the geographical area from which you're training in, so it might be around the Logan area or Sherwood area. It might be on the north side, so it might cater for Kippering Transport Department or over at Caboolture or somewhere like that. Okay, and the next thing we look at is the training vehicle that you'll be using, the make model, if it's a manual or an automatic, and you just write that in the box there. And then we've got the training vehicle requirements in terms of dual controls, and then training vehicle requirements in relation to an additional mirror. Then we've got prerequisites prior to enrollment. These are the requirements the learner must meet prior to training with you. L-plate requirements, learner BAC requirements, and then name some learning resources and materials that you can use in your training program. One that comes to mind straight away is your Keys to Driving in Queensland. Okay, so the first part of the program here is looking at basic skills overview. When we talk about basic skills, we're talking about at the very start of the training program, beginner basics. Even though I've got the Q-Safe test form on the right side of the page, what I'm trying to highlight there is that there are some essential pre-drive checks that you would do with the student, because ultimately the examiner can ask the student to show these controls on the driving test. So we've got mirror adjustment, headlights, dip, wipers, washers, demister, air conditioning, hazard lights, and seat adjustment. Of course, there'd be other controls that you would go through, but these are the 8 essentials that we're looking for as a starting point in this assessment. Then we've got section 2.2 and 2.3, steering, hand positions, and steering techniques. And I'll just go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about those. Okay, so on the left side of the screen, we've got the Q-Safe Queensland Driver License Assessment. And on the right side, I've just put page 48, and that has the performance outcome for steering control and steering operation. So what you would do as a trainer is make sure that you're familiar with what the performance outcome requirements are, because that gives us a clear goal as to what we're working towards as a trainer. Then also have a look at the scoring criteria, that is the non-critical driving errors, the critical driving errors, the specific repeated errors, so that you have an appreciation of what some of the errors are that people make on driving tests, so that when you put together your lesson plans, you can make sure that you're covering off on all the expectations by Queensland Transport. So for example, something that's always at the forefront of my mind is about the hand positioning on the steering wheel. So drivers can have their hands at 9 and 3 or 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, and they can use hand over hand or pull push techniques. What they can't do, for example, is place their hands on the inside rim of the steering wheel, steer with one hand only, i.e. palming. They can use one hand if they're changing gears, for example, or reversing. They can't steer holding the steering wheel with arms crossed or in a manner that restricts movement of the steering wheel. So by knowing those things, I can teach in a proactive manner of the correct technique to use, but also aware of what they shouldn't be doing as well. So this source document can be really helpful when you're putting a training program together, because people will ask you questions about what is acceptable or not acceptable for them to be able to do. Okay, in this slide we've got 2.4, driver trainer basic skills include cabin drill and controls, seat and seatbelt adjustment, mirror adjustment, lateral/road position, observation techniques, starting and stopping for moving the vehicle, steering techniques, and reversing. So when we do the practical assessment, we get the training instructors to deliver these as training, as lessons. And what that would entail is you normally have two types of students. You have a beginner student where you would be demonstrating, explaining, and then running them through the exercises. Or you might have a returning or a student with some experience where you may actually ask them the questions because they may already know how to set the seat up, steering wheel, and so forth. For the sake of this exercise, we're getting our learner at the start. So the training instructor in the practical would deliver these at the start. Now, just going to the next section, what we're looking at here is for you to put in the field below the location where you could do some beginner training. And I've given an example there, but it might not necessarily be in a big open empty car park. It might be actually that you start lessons on the street because you don't have an area like that. And I suppose the main thing you'd be looking at is that it's a very quiet area, plenty of visibility, plenty of places to pull over and stop and debrief and those types of things. We're in quite a low stress situation if we can help it. So we then go on to the areas for driving around the block. So once we've done our beginner basics, if we're going around the block to the left and then going around the block to the right, again, we want somewhere that you think it's low stakes situation. The other thing I would just make a note of while we're on this slide is you have to be very mindful that going into private properties for car park training, like that's something that I would recommend avoiding because people are actually paying tenants of those locations. And sometimes if driving schools are driving around there and that type of thing, that can create an issue. So be very thoughtful about where you conduct your training in the beginner phase. Okay, then we look at our intermediate skills. And again, just to give you a guideline, what we're looking for here is what some of the intermediate skills that you would focus on. If you look on the right side of the page, you can see the Q-Safe testing form, and section D covers off on vehicle operation skills. So by that we mean ancillary controls, and that might be something like the air conditioning or putting a window up or down. And then we've got clutch coasting, stalling, accelerator, gears, steering control, steering operation, braking, road position, maneuver positions, left turn position before and after a corner, and right turn position before and after a corner. So that gives you a guide of some of the things that you could put into your training program. And again, you would go through the performance outcomes as per Transport Main Roads, and then put your lesson plans together to train the student in those skills. In the QSafe form, if you want to read up on those, that's from pages 45 to 57, all of those skills, operational skills. Then we go to 3.2, which is hazard recognition and decision-making skills. Some people would call these like defensive driving skills. And if we look on the far right bottom corner, we can see that section E has observation scanning, shoulder checks, mirrors, signaling, traffic hazard, judgment, safety margins, progress, signs, signals and markings, and then speed. So again, you would then, I'll just go to the next slide, go to the QSafe manual, and on pages 57 to 64, you will see the outline of each of those performance checks, and it will tell you what the performance outcome is, as well as the different error types to be aware of. Then we go to 3.3, specific training locations for intermediate skills. So here we have our student in the middle part of their logbook hours. And what we're looking for here is for you to think about your local training area and write down in the space on the right side of the table where you could go and work on road positioning, where you could go and work on observation techniques, where you could work on road law understanding. So that might be things like give way signs, stop signs, speed zones, roadworks areas, bicycle lanes. It just goes on and on. But again, we're only really looking for one example there. Speed choice area, stop position, system of car control, and turning at all types of intersections. Then we've got below that the maneuvers and parking, so an area where you could do a hill start, a reverse park, reversing exercise, turn around, gear changing for automatics. Then we've got the various types of U-turns. So again, go through and see if you can find at least one location for each of those. Some people who've done this assignment have done so such that they're all quite close together, which isn't a bad idea, because when you're training, it means you can get good bang for your buck in terms of knocking out the maneuvers in quick succession, so the student feels like, you know, they're getting value from their lesson, rather than having them 15 kilometers apart, having to drive all over town to get the maneuvers. Okay, then we go to section 4, which is advanced skills. So we're getting up towards the driving test phase for our student. And what we want to be thinking about at this phase, and this really rolls on from the last one, is that we're covering off with a really good comprehensive training program with specific driving situations. So we've got lane driving, we've got intersections, crossroads, T-sections, higher and lower speeds, and traffic density. And the big blue arrows show on section A on the QSafe test form that the driving examiners tick the circles as they cover those areas on the 35-minute driving test. Okay, 4.7, crossings as per QSafe. If you just follow the arrow across there, you'll see 3 different types of crossings: pedestrian crossing, children's crossing, and level crossing, which is a railway crossing. So if we can, we try and get each of those situations. Some areas don't have, for example, level crossings, so be it. Let's stay on the left side of the page, 3.8, specific training locations for advanced skills. So we're coming up to a point here where we're not only getting ready to do a driving test, but thinking about beyond the driving test and preparing our student for that phase of their driving. We've got all traffic conditions, we've got collision and incident avoidance space, we've got controlled intersections, decision making, gap selection, lane change, lateral position, low risk driving, observation and scanning techniques, parking, road law understanding, safety margins, speed choice for conditions, system of car control, and uncontrolled intersections. So as I'm going through my training, I'm always mindful that I've got to make sure that I get a really good cross-section of specific driving situations. And when I work in the earlier phases of training, that I'm building the foundation skills into the students to prepare them for those more advanced situations. If we stay on the left side of the page down the bottom, what we're looking for here is for you to think about some locations that you could go to with your students for a high-speed location, a low-speed location, high density, meaning like really busy areas, low density, which is less busy, a pedestrian crossing, a children's crossing, and level crossing if applicable. The final section is risk management and your basic skills areas. Being able to identify hazards is crucial in ensuring tasks are carried out safely. Your past experience in the workplace may help you to identify some hazards, but remember to also use the skills and knowledge of those around you to help. You, the training instructor, must use tables 1, 2, and 3, the risk evaluation matrix, to select the consequence, the likelihood, and the risk rating for the basic training area. So you've picked your basic training area, and now what we want to do is a risk assessment on that. Identifying hazards and controlling risk must be done continuously as new work processes, tasks, equipment, and workers come into the workplace. Once hazards have been identified, we must assess the level of risk. That is, we must determine how likely it is that someone could be harmed by the hazards and how serious the injury or illness could be. First, consider an accident occurring. The consequences or seriousness. How serious would the injury or illness be? How many people are at risk? And then we look at the likelihood. Has it happened before? How often might it happen? When is it most likely to happen? When estimating consequence and likelihood, also consider what risk controls are already in place. For example, personal protective equipment may already be used or guarding may be in place. Also think about the way different hazards linked to an activity may interact to affect the consequence or likelihood of an accident occurring. Some ways to identify hazards and control risks. Talk with your workers, including contractors who are or will be performing any tasks to identify all potential hazards and the best ways to eliminate or reduce risk. Make sure you are aware of any high-risk activities. Work with new machinery or new work processes before they happen. Understand the hazards associated with tasks you supervise and have risk controls in place before work starts. This could mean preventing work from being done while a safety issue is being resolved. Take action to resolve health and safety issues as soon as possible. This includes escalating the issue to more senior management if necessary. Once agreement is reached on how to fix a problem, implement it as soon as possible. A risk management matrix is one way of combining consequence and likelihood to give risk level. The training instructor is required to use the tables below to rate the risk of the location for your basic training area. The trainee must determine if the road situation selected is safe for a learner. The trainee must use the risk rating tool below. What is the likelihood of a crash occurring in this location? Is it almost certain? Is it likely? Is it possible, unlikely, or rare? So you've got to make a decision on the likelihood using the table. Then you go to table 2 for the consequences. What would the consequences for the trainer, learner, the vehicle, and other road users be if a crash occurred in this location? Are they extreme, major, moderate, minor, or insignificant? Then we go to table 3. So we combine our decision on the likelihood and the consequence, and we match those up by working across and down to find out whether it is low, medium, high, or extreme in terms of the risk. Our aim in our beginners training area is to keep the risk as low as possible. So this is the little table that we use at the end, and that is question 1, what is the likelihood? So you select which one you think it is. What would the consequences be? And then you pick which one you think it is. Then you go back to your risk matrix and determine whether it's low, medium, high, or extreme risk. Thanks for tuning in. This is Brendan from Watto Training.